The first thing I saw was my wife's hand trembling over a page where my name had been written again and again. Not typed, written. My signature. Laura sat at my desk in the small office off our kitchen, leaning beneath the brass lamp I had bought 15 years earlier. On the screen of my phone, she looked almost like a stranger. Her dark hair was pinned back. Her face was pale. Beside her lay copies of my driver's license, our property tax bill, and the folder containing the trust I had set aside for my daughter Hannah. Then a man stepped into the frame. He wore a gray jacket and carried a leather portfolio. He bent over Laura's shoulder, pointed at the page, and said something I could not hear. Our security camera recorded video, not sound, but I watched him tap the line where my name belonged. Laura picked up the pen again. That was the moment my heart stopped. Daniel Evelyn's voice came through the phone. "Are you there?" I had pulled my car into a gas station parking lot without remembering how I got there. The airport was 20 minutes behind me. I had spent the drive thinking about nothing more serious than whether Laura's parents had made it through security with the sandwiches Evelyn packed for them. "Yes," I finally said, "I'm watching." "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't know what else to do. Evelyn had worked for us for 12 years. She had seen us through hospital stays, family celebrations, and grief. She was not just the woman who cleaned our home. She knew the shape of our lives. "What happened?" I asked. "I came in to finish the laundry," she said. "Mrs. Mercer told me I could leave early. But then I saw her take your office key from the hook. She never goes in there when you're not home." I stared at the screen. Laura was opening the bottom drawer of my desk. "Did she say who that man is?" "No. He came through the side gate. She told me he was here to help with paperwork." Evelyn paused. "Mr. Mercer." Something didn't feel right. It had not felt right to me either. Still, I did not want to believe what I was seeing. Laura and I had been married 18 years. We had argued about money like most couples. We had argued about Hannah too. But I had never imagined I would need a camera to learn what my wife was doing behind a locked door. On my screen, Laura lifted the trust folder from the drawer. The man opened his portfolio, and I understood that whatever waited inside those papers was about to change more than our marriage. The man removed several forms from his portfolio and laid them beside the papers Laura had taken from my desk. I enlarged the image with 2 fingers. The words were blurry at first. Then the camera adjusted its focus. "Home equity line of credit." My stomach turned. Laura reached for a yellow legal pad. On it, my name appeared over and over, Daniel Mercer. Some versions were too stiff. Some slanted too sharply to the right. The man shook his head and slid another sheet toward her. She tried again. I felt something inside me go cold. This was not a careless decision made in panic. She had been practicing. "Evelyn," I said, keeping my voice low, "did you see her bring those papers into the house?" "No, sir. They may have come in his bag." "Did Laura say anything before you left?" "She asked whether you had taken her parents to the airport already." Evelyn swallowed. When I said yes, she looked relieved. That hurt more than I expected. I had offered to drive her parents because Laura said she had a headache. It had seemed like an ordinary kindness. Now I understood she had needed me out of the house and had known exactly how to make that happen. On the screen, the man handed her a small device that looked like a portable scanner. Laura fed in copies of my driver's license, then my social security card. I had kept it in the office safe with other documents I rarely touched. "Can you save this recording?" Evelyn asked. "It's already backed up." I said it more firmly than I felt. My hands were shaking against the steering wheel. The man took out his phone and held it toward Laura. She looked down, nodded, and began typing. A moment later, an email alert appeared on my own phone. "Your application has been received." For a few seconds, I could only stare at the message. Then another alert arrived from my bank's fraud protection service. "Was this you?" reply, "yes or no." My thumb hovered above the screen. I wanted to call Laura. I wanted to demand that she explain herself before the next minute passed. But the face on that camera had already shown me what anger might make worse. If I warned her, she could destroy the papers, erase messages, or tell the man to disappear. So I replied no. Then I called Martin Hale, the attorney who had helped me prepare Hannah's trust after my first wife died. When he answered, I did not say hello. "Martin," I said, "I think my wife is trying to borrow against our house using my name." Martin did not interrupt me. He listened while I described the camera footage, the forged signatures, the stranger with the portfolio, and the fraud alert from my bank. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Daniel," he said carefully, "I know you're hurt. But right now, I need you to think like a man protecting evidence, not like a husband demanding answers. That was the kind of sentence Martin had always been good at. He did not soften the truth, but he gave you something solid to hold on to. He told me to download the footage immediately and make 2 copies, one on my laptop, one on an external drive. He told me to photograph the bank alerts and save the call log from Evelyn. Most important, he told me not to go into the house alone and not to confront Laura while the man was still there. What if they leave, I asked. Then let them leave. The application is already in motion and the bank has your fraud response. You can deal with the documents. You cannot undo something said in anger. I hated that he was right. I called the number on the bank alert. After answering security questions, I had answered 100 times before I reached a woman in the fraud department named Carla. She was calm, professional, and clearly trained for frightened people. She confirmed that an online application had been submitted for a home equity line of credit in my name. The property is titled solely to you, Mr. Mercer, she said. No funds have been approved or released. I closed my eyes. But we are flagging the application, she continued. You should consider placing a credit freeze with all 3 credit bureaus tonight. And please do not share any verification codes with anyone. I won't, I said. When the call ended, I sat in my car until the sun went down behind the gas station sign. The world kept moving around me with an almost painful normalcy. I booked a room at a nearby motel because I could not bring myself to go home. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. I put my overnight bag on the chair and opened the camera footage again. Laura and the man were gone by then, but my office looked wrong. The desk drawer was open. The trust folder had been placed back crooked. A pen lay across the blotter uncapped. For 18 years, Laura had been the person I called when life frightened me. That night, I realized she had become the reason I was afraid to unlock my own front door. The next morning, I sat at the motel's small plastic desk with a cup of coffee I could barely taste and opened our joint checking account. For years, Laura had handled most of the household bills. I paid the mortgage, insurance, and taxes from my account. She paid utilities, groceries, and the everyday things that keep a home running. We had agreed on that arrangement when Hannah was still in high school, and I had never thought much about it since. Now I went through every statement. At first, the withdrawals looked ordinary. A pharmacy, a grocery store, a gas station near Laura's parents' house. Then I noticed transfers I had never asked about. $600 one month, $800 the next, $1,000 in March. All of them went to Laura's mother. I called Martin again. He told me to make a list, not assumptions, so I did. By noon, I had found nearly $14,000 in transfers over the past year. It was not enough to ruin us, but it was enough to tell me Laura had been carrying a secret much larger than a few missed bills. Later that afternoon, Evelyn called from her apartment. I remembered something she said. A few months ago, Mrs. Mercer asked me to bring in the mail if it came while she was out. There were envelopes from a hospital collection office. She told me they were for her parents and asked me not to leave them on the counter. I thanked her, then sat very still. Laura's father had heart trouble 2 years earlier. I knew he had spent time in the hospital. What I did not know was that they had fallen behind on payments afterward. I also did not know their small house was in danger of foreclosure. Martin found the name of the man from the application materials, Victor Sloan. He was not a lender. He ran a debt relief business from a rented office across town. His website promised fast solutions for homeowners facing financial pressure. The kind of promise that sounds harmless until someone asks you to sign a page you do not understand. For the first time, I could see the fear behind Laura's choices. Her parents had raised her after hard years. They were proud people. Asking for help would have humiliated them. Laura must have believed she could save them without anyone knowing. But then I remembered her hand moving across that legal pad trying to become me. Fear may explain why someone walks toward a cliff. It does not make them push the person beside them over the edge. I called Hannah while I was sitting in Martin's office, signing forms to dispute the loan application. For a second, I just stared at her number. My daughter was 26 years old enough to make her own life, but still young enough that every silence between us felt like a failure I had helped create. "Dad," she said when I answered, "are you okay?" I had called her because Laura had taken the trust papers from my office. The loan application was in my name, not Hannah's, but I knew she deserved to hear the truth from me before it reached her another way. "I'm okay," I told her, but something happened with Laura. There was a pause. Not surprised, not exactly. "What did she do?" Hannah asked quietly. That question landed harder than any accusation could have. I told Hannah only what I knew. I told her about Evelyn's call, the security footage, the loan application, and the papers from her trust. I expected anger. Instead, she sounded tired. Dad, she said I tried to talk to you about her before. I know. No, I don't think you do. She reminded me of the time she had called after Laura and I had argued about money. The times Laura had said Hannah was being dramatic jealous or worried about her inheritance. I had listened because it was easier than asking hard questions. When Hannah pulled away, I told myself she was an adult building her own life. The truth was uglier. I had let Laura interpret my daughter to me, and I had let Hannah believe I did not care enough to hear her directly. I thought you only called when you needed something, I admitted. Hannah let out a small, bitter laugh. That's what Laura told you. I did not answer. She told me Laura had repeatedly suggested that I wanted space whenever Hannah tried to visit. Once Hannah had driven nearly 3 hours to see me, only to be told at the door that I was sick and asleep. I had been in the backyard all afternoon repairing the fence. I remembered that day. Laura had told me Hannah had stopped by, but did not want to wake me. I felt sick. I should have asked you, I said. Yes, Hannah replied, you should have. Before we hung up, she said she would meet me at Martin's office the next morning, not to confront Laura, but to sit beside me while I made decisions I could no longer make alone. For the first time in years, my daughter was not asking me to choose her. She was simply showing up, and I knew I had almost lost the right to let her. Hannah sat beside me at Martin's office the next morning, quiet but steady, while we reviewed the bank records and the footage. That evening, I went home. Martin had advised me to choose a time when Laura was likely to be alone and to have someone nearby. So my old friend Tom sat in his truck across the street while I walked up the front path, carrying a folder of printed bank records and a copy of the security footage. The house looked exactly as it always had. The porch light was on. Laura's herb pots sat beside the steps. Through the front window, I could see the familiar glow of the kitchen. Laura was sitting at the kitchen table when I came in. She looked as though she had not slept. Her eyes were swollen and the untouched cup of tea in front of her had gone cold. Where have you been? She asked. I placed the folder on the table. With Martin. Her face changed. Daniel, I can explain. I hope you can. I sat across from her. Because I watched you forge my signature. She looked down at her hands. I told her the bank had stopped the application. I told her I had the footage, the records, and Evelyn's call. I did not raise my voice. I had spent too many years believing that shouting made a person strong. It does not. Sometimes it only gives the other person a way to avoid what they have done. At first, Laura said Victor had told her it was only a preliminary form. Then she said she had not intended to go through with it. But you practiced my signature, I said. Her shoulders folded inward. My parents are losing their house, she whispered. My father's bills kept coming. Mom was terrified. I didn't know what to do. You could have told me. You always shut down when money comes up. That was unfair but not completely false. I should have listened more, I said. But you don't get to use that as an excuse for stealing from me or from Hannah. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I was going to put it back, with borrowed money taken in my name. She had no answer. Then I asked the question that hurt most. Why did you keep Hannah away from me? Laura looked toward the window. Because every time she came around, I felt like I was losing you. The kitchen went quiet. I loved you, I said. You could have told me you were afraid. Instead, you made my daughter feel unwanted. Laura covered her face and began to cry. I sat there grieving a marriage that was still standing around us. The next morning, Martin met Laura and me at his office. Laura had hired her own attorney by then, a woman named Renee Walker, who spoke gently but did not waste words. She explained that the bank had preserved the application records and that Victor Sloan had already been contacted by its fraud investigators. There is no money missing, Renee said. That matters. But attempted fraud and forgery are still serious. Laura nodded without looking up. I had imagined this moment differently during the long night at the motel. In my angriest thoughts, I pictured Laura being led away in handcuffs. I pictured her parents learning exactly what she had done. I pictured every person who had ever doubted me hearing the whole ugly story. But when the moment came, I felt no triumph. I only felt tired. Martin asked whether I wanted to press forward with a police report. I did. Not because I wanted to punish Laura, but because Victor had known exactly what he was doing. The application was not some misunderstanding between spouses. He had helped her use copied identification and forged documents to obtain money from a home she did not own. The bank's investigators later told us Victor had approached other homeowners with similar promises. He found people under pressure, told them a quick loan could solve everything, and then moved them toward fraud one small step at a time. Laura agreed to cooperate with the investigation. Her attorney made clear that cooperation would not erase what she had done, but it could help prevent him from doing it to someone else. I did not call Laura's parents to shame them. Martin advised against involving them until Laura chose how to tell them. Their debts had not caused her choices. Their fear had not held the pen in her hand. Still, I could not remain married to her. A week later, I filed for divorce. The papers were quiet. No dramatic courtroom scene. No demand that she lose everything. I asked for the house to remain mine because I had owned it before our marriage. Laura agreed to move into an apartment near her parents while the divorce proceeded. When she came back for clothes, she stood in the hallway with 2 boxes at her feet. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. I believe she believed that. But love is not only what we mean to do. It is also what we are willing to do when we are afraid. "You did hurt me," I said, "and you hurt Hannah." Laura nodded. Then she picked up the boxes and walked out. I did not stop her. Once Laura was gone, I expected the house to feel peaceful. Instead, it felt exposed. Every drawer seemed to contain a question I should have asked sooner. Every envelope looked suspicious. I had spent years believing that careful people did not need to worry about fraud. I kept my bills paid. I did not gamble. I did not lend money carelessly. But safety is not something you earn once and keep forever. Martin referred me to a financial advisor, and together we spent an afternoon going through my life one account at a time. We placed a credit freeze with all 3 major credit bureaus. I changed every password connected to my bank retirement accounts, email, and insurance. I turned on 2-step verification, even though I had always found those extra codes irritating. I replaced the lock on my office door, moved original documents into a bank safe deposit box, and updated the contact information on Hannah's trust. I also reviewed the beneficiary forms on my retirement account. That was when I found something that made me sit back in my chair. Laura was still listed as the primary beneficiary. If something had happened to me before that week, she would have received money I had intended, at least in part, to protect Hannah's future. The advisor did not judge me. She simply said most people forget to update these things after life changes. That sentence stayed with me. Later, I told Hannah what I had done. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad, you don't have to prove anything to me with paperwork." "I know," I said. "This isn't about proving it. It's about being responsible." I also began looking honestly at the mistakes that could not be fixed with new passwords. Laura had been afraid to talk about money, and I had made it easy for her to avoid the conversation. I had been afraid of conflict, and I had called that being calm. There is a difference. Being calm means facing a hard truth without losing yourself. Avoiding conflict means pretending the truth will disappear if you leave it alone. I started meeting with a counselor once a week. At first, I told myself it was because of the divorce, but it became clear that I needed help understanding why I had closed off from Hannah and why I had allowed my marriage to become so quiet that a crisis could grow inside it without my noticing. The camera in my office had protected my finances. It could not protect the trust that had already been broken. That part would require something no security system could provide: honesty, patience, and the courage to hear what I had not wanted to hear before. By the time autumn arrived, the divorce was moving through the ordinary slow machinery of the court system. There were forms, deadlines, financial disclosures, and long stretches where nothing seemed to happen. Laura had moved into a small apartment 15 minutes from her parents. I heard through her attorney that she had started counseling and was helping investigators understand how Victor had recruited her. I did not ask for details. My energy had turned toward Hannah. Our first real conversation took place in a coffee shop halfway between my house and her apartment. She chose the place. I was grateful for that. It told me she was willing to meet me, but not yet willing to step fully into my world. She arrived wearing a navy sweater and carrying the same serious expression she had worn as a teenager when she knew I was about to disappoint her. "I don't know how to do this," she said after we sat down. "Neither do I." That was the most honest answer I had. For the next hour, Hannah told me things I had never let myself hear. She told me how alone she felt after her mother died. She told me she had tried to be patient with Laura because she knew I was lonely. She told me that every time Laura suggested Hannah was selfish or difficult, I became distant instead of asking Hannah what was true. "I thought you had replaced me," she said. I wanted to tell her that was never true, but I understood that my intentions had not changed what she experienced. "I didn't replace you," I said, "but I made you feel replaceable. I'm sorry." Her eyes filled, and for a moment I thought she might leave. Instead, she reached across the table and touched my hand. We began seeing a family counselor twice a month. Some sessions were awkward, some were painful. There were days Hannah barely spoke, and days I wanted to explain myself until I realized explanation can sound too much like defense. Slowly, though, we learned how to stay in the room when things became uncomfortable. A few weeks later, Hannah called and said she had found a new apartment closer to her job. Her voice was lighter than I had heard in years. "Could you help me move Saturday?" she asked. I looked around my quiet living room, then smiled. I'd be there before the truck. That Saturday, I carried boxes, assembled a bookshelf badly, and made 3 trips to the hardware store because I bought the wrong curtain rod. Hannah laughed at me so hard she had to sit down on the floor. It was not a grand reconciliation. It was better. It was an ordinary day with my daughter, and neither of us was pretending anymore. Nearly a year after Evelyn's call, my divorce became final. There was no celebration afterward. I came home, set the court papers on the kitchen counter, and stood there for a long time listening to the refrigerator hum. 18 years of marriage had ended in a handful of signatures and a quiet judge's order. Laura's legal case was handled separately, under a negotiated plea agreement, and because the loan had been stopped before money was released, and she cooperated with the investigation into Victor Sloan, she avoided jail. But she did not avoid consequences: probation, counseling, a financial responsibility course, and community service. Victor faced more serious charges for targeting homeowners who were frightened, overwhelmed, and easy to manipulate. I did not follow every detail. Some chapters must close before they can stop owning your mind. A few weeks later, Laura sent me a letter. It was not a plea to come back. It did not ask for forgiveness. She wrote that she was ashamed of what she had done, and that she finally understood how fear had turned her into someone she no longer recognized. She also wrote that she had apologized to Hannah. I read the letter twice, then placed it in a drawer. I was not ready to forgive Laura in the way people sometimes expect. Forgiveness is not pretending the wound never happened, and reconciliation is not always returning to the person who broke your trust. But I no longer wanted anger to be the last thing I carried from our marriage. Hannah came for dinner the following Sunday. She brought a pie from the bakery near her apartment, and I overcooked the chicken because we were talking in the kitchen, and I lost track of time. She teased me about it. I told her the pie could save the meal. For the first time in many years, the house felt like a home again. Not because everything had been repaired, because the truth was finally allowed inside. If there is one thing I learned, it is this: pay attention when a trusted person tells you something is wrong. Protect your accounts, your documents, and your credit. But also protect your relationships by asking hard questions before silence becomes a wall. Fear can make people hide things. Shame can make people lie. But love without honesty is only a comforting story we tell ourselves. If this story moved you, take a moment to think about the conversations you may have been avoiding. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that boundaries and compassion can exist together, please share this story with them. The end.